Ethan Cole had lived alone on his ranch for almost 7 years. His land stretched far across the dry Arizona desert, with tall sagebrush plants, scattered cedar trees, and long dirt paths that only a few travelers ever used. Life was simple for him. He woke with the sunrise, fed his horses, tended to the fences, and worked until the sky turned orange in the evening. He liked the silence, the open sky, and the steady rhythm of ranch life. He did not expect surprises. But life often had its own plans. One late afternoon, Ethan was riding along the eastern fence line, checking for any broken sections. The wind was colder than usual, bringing dust across his path. His horse, Dusty, moved slowly, as if sensing something unusual. Ethan tugged the reins gently and scanned the area. At first he thought he saw a shadow, or maybe just a dark rock near the base of a cedar tree. But when the shadow moved slightly, he realized it was a person. He slowed his horse and watched carefully. The figure appeared small and tired, sitting with arms wrapped tightly around the knees. As he got closer, he saw it was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, wearing clothes covered in dust. Her long dark hair was tangled, and her face showed fear mixed with exhaustion. She didn't stand or run. She simply sat still, like someone who had no strength left. Ethan stopped a few steps away so he wouldn't frighten her. "Ma'am?" he called gently. "You all right? Do you need help?" The woman lifted her head slowly. Her eyes, dark and sharp, watched him carefully. She looked like someone who had been walking for days. Her lips were dry, and her breathing was uneven. After a long pause, she said in a soft voice, "Water, please." Ethan reached into his saddlebag slowly and took out a small tin flask. Before stepping closer, he lifted his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm just giving you water," he said calmly. "Nothing else." The woman nodded once, still watching him with caution. Ethan stepped forward and placed the flask on the ground between them. She waited until he stepped back before reaching for it. She drank slowly, taking careful sips, as if afraid the water might disappear. After she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." Ethan nodded. "Do you live nearby? Are you lost?" She hesitated before answering. "My name is Mira," she said quietly. "I am." Apache. Ethan felt a small pang of concern. The region had a long history, and not every rancher treated Apache people kindly. But Ethan was different. He believed every person deserved respect as long as they meant no harm. He spoke softly. "I'm Ethan. Are you hurt? Do you need food?" Mira looked down at her hands. "I walked far," she said, her voice shaking. "Farther than I ever walked before. I had to leave. I had no choice." Ethan did not ask for details. He could see she was struggling, and pressing her for answers would only make things harder. Instead, he said, "The sun's going down. You shouldn't stay out here alone. My ranch is just a mile from here. You can rest there. I'll give you space. I won't bother you." Myra looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. She seemed unsure whether to trust him or not. Finally, she whispered something Ethan did not expect. "You're the first man who didn't harm me." Ethan felt his chest tighten. The sentence held more weight than she realized. He understood she had gone through something painful, though she did not describe it. Her eyes showed the story fear, caution, and deep exhaustion. He spoke gently. "You don't need to fear me. You're safe." "Let me help you," Mira nodded weakly. Ethan dismounted slowly and offered his hand. She hesitated but placed her hand in his. Her touch was light, almost weightless. Ethan helped her stand, noticing how unsteady she was. She nearly stumbled, but he stepped aside to give her room, making sure she knew he wasn't holding her against her will. "You can ride on Dusty," he said. "He's calm. He won't scare you." She climbed onto the horse with effort, gripping the saddle horn tightly. Ethan walked beside her, holding the reins gently. They moved slowly across the sandy ground toward the ranch. The sky was turning a soft pink when they arrived. Ethan's ranch house was small but well kept, built from sturdy wooden logs. A few chickens wandered near the porch, and his horse corral sat just behind the barn. Smoke rose from the chimney, showing the fire he had left burning since morning. Ethan guided Dusty to a stop. Mira slid down carefully, her legs trembling. He stepped back to give her space. "Come inside," he said. "You need rest and food." Mira followed him into the house. The interior was simple: a wooden table, 2 chairs, a fireplace, and a small shelf holding a few old books. A warm, comforting smell filled the room, beans and vegetables simmering in a pot. "You can sit here," Ethan said, pulling out a chair. Mira sat slowly, her eyes scanning the room as if checking for danger. She seemed unused to quiet houses. Ethan moved around carefully so he wouldn't startle her. He ladled warm food into a bowl and placed it in front of her. She didn't touch it at first. You won't force me to do anything?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan looked surprised but shook his head firmly. "No, never. You're a guest here. I don't expect anything from you." Her shoulders relaxed, just a little. Only then did she begin to eat, taking small, careful bites. She seemed almost embarrassed by how hungry she was, so Ethan turned away slightly, pretending to check something near the fireplace to give her privacy. After several minutes, she put the spoon down and looked at him again. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Ethan shrugged lightly. "Because you needed help." She studied him again. Her eyes softened for the first time since he found her. "Men don't help for free," she whispered, as though repeating a lesson she had learned many times. "But you are different." Ethan didn't know what to say. He simply nodded and pulled a folded blanket from a shelf. "You can rest here tonight," he said softly. "The couch is yours. It's warm near the fire." Myra stood up slowly and touched the blanket, almost as if checking whether it was truly hers to use. She looked uncertain. Ethan stepped back, allowing her space, as always. "You are safe," he said gently. "No one will come here. And I'm not going to bother you." Myra lowered herself onto the couch. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. Her face showed tiredness, but also a small hint of relief. Ethan took a seat at the far end of the room, giving her plenty of distance. He grabbed an old book but didn't read much. Every few minutes, he glanced at her to make sure she was okay. Mira lay still, her eyes drifting closed, but every sound made her flinch lightly. She was someone who had lived with fear for a long time, someone who was not used to kindness. After a while, Mira opened her eyes again. She spoke softly in the dim light. "Ethan." "Yes," he replied gently. "Why don't you sleep?" "You are tired too," Ethan smiled faintly. "I'll sleep later. I just want to make sure the fire stays warm for you." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "You truly are the first man who didn't harm me." Those words stayed with Ethan long after her breathing became steady and she fell asleep. He stared into the fire, thinking about how fragile she seemed, how strong she must have been to walk alone across the desert, and how much fear she must have carried inside her. That night, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself. He would protect her peace. He would give her space, safety, and kindness because she deserved it, and because no one should live in fear. As the fire crackled softly and the desert wind whispered outside, Mira slept under his roof for the first time, unaware that her arrival would change both of their lives in ways neither could yet understand. Morning sunlight touched the ranch slowly, warming the wooden walls and brightening the quiet rooms. Ethan woke early, as he always did, but that morning he moved more quietly than usual. He didn't want to disturb Mira, who was still sleeping on the couch wrapped in the thick blanket. Her breathing was calm now, steady and peaceful, so different from the frightened look she'd carried the night before. He stepped outside to feed the horses and check the barn. The sky was a soft shade of gold, and the cool morning air carried the smell of fresh hay. Ethan worked calmly, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman inside his house. She had come out of nowhere, tired and scared. He didn't know her story, but he knew enough to understand she needed rest and kindness. He planned to give her both as long as she stayed. When he returned to the house, Mira was awake. She sat on the couch with the blanket still around her shoulders, her dark hair hanging loose. She looked cleaner, her face washed, her eyes clearer. But she still looked cautious, like someone unsure if she was allowed to feel safe. Ethan smiled. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." Mira nodded slowly. "I slept. More than I have in many days." "That's good," Ethan replied. "There's warm tea on the table. And I made some bread." Mira looked at the table, then looked back at him, as if making sure the offer was truly real. "Thank you," she whispered before sitting at the table. Ethan didn't sit close to her. He took the chair on the other side of the small room, giving her plenty of space. He could see she appreciated it. She drank the tea slowly, warming her hands on the cup. "Do you feel better today?" Ethan asked after a moment. Mira nodded. "My legs still hurt, but I feel better." Ethan looked at her gently. "You can stay here as long as you need. It's no rush. No pressure." Mira lowered her eyes. "You are very kind," she said softly. "I'm not used to this." Ethan didn't respond right away. He could tell she wasn't just talking about the ranch, she was talking about her life. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want to reopen wounds. Instead, he said, "I'll be outside fixing the fence today. If you need anything, just call." Mira watched him stand up. She seemed unsure whether she could help or whether she should stay inside. Before he could leave, she spoke quietly. "Can I do something?" "I want to help. I don't want to sit here doing nothing." Ethan turned back toward her. "You don't need to work," he said gently. "You're still recovering." "I know," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "But I want to feel useful. I don't like being helpless. Even small work is fine." Ethan saw the determination in her eyes. He understood. Sometimes work helped the mind heal. "All right," he said with a nod. "If you feel strong enough, you can help me feed the chickens." "It's simple." Mira gave a small, almost shy smile. "I can do that." The next few days settled into a new routine. Mira helped with small tasks around the ranch, not heavy work, just enough to keep her busy and make her feel part of something. She collected eggs, swept the porch, handed Ethan tools while he repaired fences, and sometimes helped mix feed for the animals. Ethan noticed how carefully she watched everything, as if learning a new world. She watched how he saddled the horse, how he tied the knots, how he mended broken boards. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was calm and clear. In the evenings, after a long day of work, Ethan would sit by the fire with a book. Mira often sat quietly nearby, sometimes mending a small tear in her dress or just staring at the flames. Slowly, her nervousness began to fade. She still flinched at sudden sounds, still scanned the area whenever someone approached, but she no longer looked like she was ready to run at any moment. One afternoon, when they were returning from the horse corral, Myra paused by the gate and looked at the horizon. The desert stretched far and wide, glowing under the sun. Ethan noticed her expression. "You thinking about home?" he asked softly. Mira nodded. "I miss my people, but I'm afraid to go back. Things are not easy there. I don't know if I belong anymore." "You belong somewhere," Ethan said. "Everyone does." Mira looked at him with gentle eyes. "Where do you belong, Ethan?" He gave a small smile. "Here, I guess. I never needed much. A quiet place, honest work, a roof over my head. That's enough." Mira studied him silently for a moment. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yes. Why?" she asked. Not out of curiosity, but something deeper. Ethan shrugged. "Never found a reason not to. Ranch life is simple. Not everyone wants this life, but I like it." Mira looked down at her hands. "It is peaceful here," she said softly. "Very peaceful." A week passed. Mira slowly grew stronger. Her face brightened, her steps became more confident, and her voice no longer trembled. But she still carried a quiet sadness deep inside. Something Ethan could sense but didn't force her to explain. One evening, as the sun was setting, they heard horses approaching from far away. Ethan stepped outside immediately. Mira followed him, but when she saw the riders, she froze in fear. There were 3 men on horseback, riding along the nearby trail. They looked like travelers, but something about them made her take a step back. Ethan noticed instantly. He put his hand gently behind him, signaling Mira to stay behind him, not touching her, just creating a protective shield with his presence. The riders slowed down when they saw Ethan. Evening. One of them, called Ethan, nodded. Evening. We lost our way, the man said. Road's confusing around here. Know which way leads to Dry Creek? Ethan pointed west. Straight that way. Keep riding until you see a fork. Take the right path. You'll reach Dry Creek before sunset. The man nodded. Appreciate it. The men rode off. When they were out of sight, Mira let out a shaky breath she had been holding. Ethan turned to her. You okay? He asked softly. Her voice trembled. I thought they were someone else. Ethan nodded slowly. It's all right. They're gone now. Mira wiped her hands against her dress, trying to steady herself. I don't like when riders come near, she said. It reminds me of bad things. Ethan didn't ask for details. He simply said, whenever someone comes by, you stay inside if it makes you feel safer. You don't have to face anyone. Mira looked at him carefully. You always stand in front of me, she said quietly. Ethan shrugged lightly. Just making sure you feel safe. You don't even know what happened to me, she whispered. You don't have to tell me, he said gently. Your comfort is more important than your story. Mira lowered her eyes, touched by his kindness. You don't treat me like other men, she said softly. Ethan looked at her calmly. I treat you like a person who deserves respect. That's all. Days passed. Mira began opening up little by little, not details. It's not painful memories, but small thoughts, simple feelings. She told Ethan about her childhood, how she loved climbing trees, how she learned to track animals, how she always dreamed of seeing faraway lands. She spoke of her mother's cooking, her father's stories, the river where she used to sit for hours. Ethan listened without interrupting, without judging. Sometimes he shared small pieces of his own past to his childhood in a small town, his father teaching him how to ride. The dreams he once had before ranch life claimed him. Their conversations were calm, gentle, and full of quiet trust. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together, Mira accidentally dropped a wooden spoon. It hit the floor with a loud sound. She immediately flinched and stepped back. Her breath shaking, Ethan knelt down slowly, picked up the spoon, and placed it on the table. It's all right, he said softly. It's just a spoon. Mira relaxed slowly. Then she whispered, You never raise your voice. You never get angry. I'm not used to that, Ethan smiled gently. I don't have a reason to be angry. Mira looked at him with grateful eyes. You make this place feel safe, she said, like a place where nothing bad can happen. Ethan didn't know how to answer that, but her words warmed him more than the fire ever could. One afternoon, when Ethan returned from repairing a broken fence, he found Mira sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset. She seemed deep in thought. He sat a short distance away, waiting quietly until she spoke. I don't know what my future is, she said softly. I don't know where I belong. Ethan looked at the wide desert before them. Maybe you're still searching, he said. Sometimes it takes time. Mira glanced at him. Do you think I could stay here a little longer? Ethan smiled gently. You can stay as long as you want. This ranch is safe for you. You don't need to rush. She nodded slowly, relieved. Thank you, Ethan. Truly. He looked at her with warmth. You're welcome, Myra. As the last light of day faded into soft shadows, Mira felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She didn't know where her journey would lead next, but she knew one thing for certain. Ethan had given her a place where she could breathe, heal, and feel human again. And that was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. For the next several weeks, Myra settled into life on the ranch more comfortably than she ever expected. Each day felt calmer, safer, and brighter than the last. The simple routine of feeding chickens, gathering water, helping with small chores, and sitting quietly in the evenings healed parts of her heart she once believed were permanently broken. Ethan noticed the changes in her too. She walked taller, spoke more freely, and looked less fearful. Sometimes he caught her humming soft tunes while sweeping the porch or plucking dust from her dress. something she never did before. These small signs were proof that she no longer lived in constant fear, but Ethan also knew healing took time. He didn't rush her. He simply gave her space, safety, and kindness. One warm morning, Mira stood by the corral watching Ethan saddle Dusty. She shaded her eyes with her hand, the sun painting her hair with a golden glow. She looked stronger, almost like a different person from the frightened woman he had first found under that cedar tree. "Where are you going?" she asked gently. "Just checking the far pasture," Ethan replied. "Fence might be loose again. Can I come?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, surprised but pleased. "If you feel comfortable, yes. But it's a long ride." "I don't mind," she said, her voice steady. He helped her onto Dusty, making sure she was balanced before climbing behind her. They rode slowly, the wind brushing against them as the open land stretched wide and peaceful before them, as they moved along the dusty trail. Mira looked around with a mixture of wonder and calm. She had seen the landscape from the ranch, but being out in the open, riding across the empty desert, made her feel a new kind of freedom. A soft smile touched her lips. "You like it out here?" Ethan asked. Mira nodded. "It feels quiet. Like the land is listening. It listens to everyone who respects it." They reached the far pasture, repaired a loose post together, and took a short break under a large rock that cast a cool shadow. Mira watched Ethan work steady hands, calm voice, patient movements. She admired how he treated everything around him with care. The animals, the land, even tools. There was gentleness in everything he did. After a while, she spoke softly. "Ethan, when I first came here, I didn't think I would stay." "I know," he said gently. "I didn't trust anyone," she continued. "I was tired of being scared. I thought every day would be the same." Ethan didn't interrupt. He waited. "But you changed that," Mira said, meeting his eyes. "You showed me that not everyone is unkind. You gave me a place where I could breathe." Ethan looked at her with quiet warmth. "I'm glad you feel safe here." Mira lowered her gaze. "I do. More than anywhere before." Their ride back to the ranch was peaceful. Birds flew overhead, and the soft crunch of Dusty's hooves filled the silence. For the first time, Mira felt the land welcoming her. A few days later, they went into town for supplies. Mira was nervous at first. She stayed close to Ethan, her hands gripping her shawl. But Ethan made sure she felt protected. He guided her gently through the small streets, never rushing her. As they entered the general store, the storekeeper, an older woman named Mrs. Dawson, greeted them warmly. "Well now, Ethan, and who is this young lady?" she asked kindly. Mira lowered her eyes, unsure what to say. "This is Mira," Ethan replied. "She's helping me on the ranch." Mrs. Dawson smiled at Mira. "Pleasure to meet you, dear." Mira gave a small nod. Ethan noticed her shoulders relax slightly. The town was small, and most people respected Ethan, so they respected the person with him too. After buying supplies, they returned to the ranch. As they unpacked, Mira looked thoughtful. "People in town. They weren't unkind," she said. Ethan smiled. "Not everyone is. Sometimes the world gives us the wrong impression because of a few people." Mira nodded slowly. "Maybe I can learn to trust more." "We'll get there," Ethan said. "One step at a time." Another week passed, and Mira continued growing stronger. She learned how to tend the garden, how to grind grain, how to mend rope, and even how to ride Dusty alone with Ethan walking beside her. She was becoming part of the ranch, part of the land, part of the peaceful life she never imagined she could have. One evening, after a long day of gathering firewood and repairing the porch railing, Mira and Ethan sat outside watching the sunset. The sky glowed with shades of orange and red, and the air was warm and soft. "Ethan," Mira said quietly, "I've been thinking." He turned to her. "About what?" "A place of my own," she replied. "Close by? Maybe a small cabin. I don't want to be a burden. I want to stand on my own feet." Ethan studied her expression. She wasn't asking to leave. She was asking for independence, for dignity. "You're not a burden," he said gently. "I know," she said, giving him a small smile. But I want to build something for myself too. Something that shows I'm not trapped anymore. Ethan nodded slowly. There's an old cabin behind the barn, he said. It's been empty for years. Needs repairs, but the base is strong. If you want, we can fix it together. Myra's face lit up with a quiet brightness. I would like that very much. And so they began working on the cabin the very next morning. The cabin was small. It's just one room with a tiny window and a stone foundation. It had been empty so long that dust covered every corner and the door hung crooked. But Mira saw potential in it. A place she could call her own, built with her own hands. For several days, they repaired it together. Myra swept out old leaves and dirt, scrubbed the wooden floor, and helped Ethan fix the roof shingles. They straightened the door, cleaned the window, and patched holes in the walls. Mira even found a few wildflowers near the creek and placed them in a jar on the windowsill as they worked. Mira felt stronger not just in her body, but in her spirit. Every stroke of the broom, every board she held steady, every nail Ethan hammered made her feel like she was shaping her future. One evening, when they finally finished repairing the roof, they stood outside the cabin and admired their work. The cabin looked simple, but clean and welcoming. It's beautiful, Mira said softly. It's yours, Ethan replied. A fresh start. Mira touched the door with gentle fingers. She whispered, I never thought I would have a place of my own. You earned it, Ethan said. You've worked hard. Mira turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. You helped me more than you know. Ethan shook his head. You did the hardest part. You learned to trust again. That takes courage. Myra smiled, a warm, steady smile. I'm learning. Because you showed me kindness. A few days later, news reached the ranch that the group of men who once frightened her had been arrested in a town far away because of unrelated trouble. A traveling merchant told Ethan while passing by. When Ethan shared this news with Mira, she stood quietly for a long moment, absorbing it. So they can't hurt anyone anymore, she asked, her voice low. No, Ethan said. They can't. Mira closed her eyes and let out a long breath, a breath she had been holding for weeks, maybe years. For the first time, she felt the past losing its hold on her. She whispered, I'm free now. Ethan nodded. Yes, you are. Later that evening, Mira stood alone outside her cabin, watching the sky turn deep blue. The stars slowly appeared, one by one, glowing softly. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and felt the gentle breeze brush against her face. Ethan walked up quietly and stood beside her. Thinking again? He asked softly. Mira nodded. About everything. About how scared I was. About how you helped me without asking for anything. About how this place healed me. Ethan said nothing. He simply listened. Mira turned to him. When I first arrived, you told me I was safe. I didn't believe it then, but I believe it now. I'm glad, Ethan replied softly. Mira looked at her cabin, then back at him. You gave me hope again. You showed me a kind of life I didn't know existed, then smiled gently. You deserve hope. You deserve peace. Myra stepped closer, not out of fear, but out of trust. Thank you, Ethan. Truly, he nodded, his voice calm. You're welcome, Mira. They stood together in the quiet night, the stars shining above them, the ranch peaceful around them. The wind whispered through the sagebrush. Carrying the soft rhythm of a new beginning, Mira finally felt what she had been longing for. All her alone, a place to belong, a place to breathe, a place to rebuild, and Ethan quiet, steady and kind, had given her that place without asking for anything in return. Their story wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, gentle, and born from kindness, and that was what made it powerful.